Problem 1. Once again, welcome to the 0320 final review. Looking at problem 1, they're asking us to factor. We're dealing with a trinomial, so we're looking for the greatest common factor. So do we have a greatest common factor from the 3 terms? 6. So let's factor out 6. Alright, which is bringing me to the following. From here, I'm looking inside the parentheses to see if we can factor further. So I'm going to take 3 times a negative 20, which is going to give us a negative 60. So are there any factors of a negative 60 that are going to add to give me a negative 7? All right, a negative 12 and positive 5? All right, so a negative 12 and a positive 5. Let's double check. When you multiply those together, you get a negative 60. When you add them together, you get a negative 7. All right, so I don't want to forget about this 6. So we have 3x squared minus 12x plus 5x minus 20. So I'm factoring by splitting the middle term. Going to factor by grouping. So what about this first grouping? What could we factor out?
3x.
3x. Leaving me with x minus 4. What about the next grouping?
5.
5, and it's a positive 5. Leaving me with x minus 4. What do you notice about the parentheses?
They're the same.
They're the same. So we have x minus 4 times 3x plus 5. Well, what needs to be out in front?
6.
The 6. So that 6 needs to be out in front. So let's look at how it's worded. It says one of the factors is. So we're looking for only one of the factors. So which one should we pick?
D.
That's right. D, which is the 3x plus 5. So we should be looking at D. Any questions on that number 1? Any questions there? Need to go back? How would I know if I didn't take out the greatest common factor? How would I know? Because that's been a problem area in my class. That's right. If there was still a common factor on the inside of the parentheses. So we got to be careful. All right, we're going to move on to question 2. Give you a chance to work it.
everyone have the information for problem number 1 copied down? Problem number 2 is a problem way back from the land of section 2.8, right? 4 months ago, roughly. Right, so, a quick refresher on that. If you have an absolute value inequality, you have to determine whether it's an and or an or statement. So which one would this be and why?
And.
It's and. And why do we know it's an and statement?
Pointing that way.
Right, it's a less than symbol, it's pointing towards the absolute value. So we have to write it as an and statement. You drop the absolute value, put 5x minus 1 less than 12. On the other side, you use the same symbol, less than, and change the sign on 12, make that a negative. Your goal now is just to get x by itself in the middle. So what would be my first step there? Right, we're going to add 1, and we need to add 1 to all 3 pieces. So negative 12 plus 1, negative 11. 12 plus 1, 13. Then my last step there, to get x by itself, divide everything by 5. So x is greater than negative 11/5 and less than 13/5. So what answer choice is that going to be?
A.
A. Any questions on that one? If this was a greater than symbol, how would I have written it? As an or statement, right? It would have been split apart with or. Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions on number 2? Are we good to go there? Alright, on number 3, they don't tell me how to solve. You remember when we took this chapter test, there were different ways of solving a system. Substitution method, addition, elimination. We even did it by graphing. But the only time we did it by graphing is when they specifically said solve the system by graphing. So we're looking at some options here. We could either solve using the substitution method or the addition elimination. It's really set up for which one. Which one do you think would be easier?
Elimination.
That's right, the addition elimination. So let's start off looking at what letter we want to eliminate. And probably you're going to think Y would be the easier one, eliminating Y. So I'm going to start there. Alright, so how would we go about eliminating Y? So I need a positive 20 and a negative 20 for those to add up to 0. So what would I multiply this top equation by?
4.
And notice we're keeping the positive 4 as what we're going to multiply by because we already have different signs. We already have different signs. So when I distribute the 4, I'm going to have 24x minus 20y equaling to a negative 20. Y'all okay with that? All right, the bottom equation is going to stay the same, so let me just rewrite it. And we're going to add the 2 equations. We're going to add them together. All right, so what about this 24x minus 9x? 15x equaling to negative 10. Now we need to divide by 15. And we need to reduce the fraction. So what are we going to get when we reduce the fraction? A negative 2/3. Remember, we've always said the only way you can really check your answer is to complete the problem. Even though I realize they're only asking for one letter, I'm going to suggest to you that you need to go further and complete it. That way you can double check your work, make sure you're on track. So I'm going to go back to that top equation. And to complete the problem, remember there's going to be a y value. I need to take that negative 2/3 and put it in place of x to be able to find that y value. So we have 6 times a negative 2/3 minus 5y equaling to a negative 5. All right, what about this 6 times a negative 2/3? Negative 4. And then from here, we're going to add 4 to both sides. So a negative 5y equals a negative 1. All right, what else do I need to do? All right, divide by negative 5. So y is going to be 1/5. So we really have the ordered pair. Let's just write what we have. A negative 2/3 and a positive 1/5. How would I check it? You know, on the test sometimes y'all forget about there's a way of checking some of your answers. So how would I go about checking that this is the correct ordered pair? That's right, plug it into the system. Plug it into both equations. Now which one were they asking for, x or y? Only for x. So we're looking for a negative 2/3, which is e. E is an elephant. All right, any questions on that? Need to backtrack. Johnny, good? right, if you have any questions, let me know. All right, otherwise we're moving on to 4. That should look familiar. If you haven't taken test 5, that's going to be test 5. My class just took it today. Anybody remember that? No better than the S joint.
At least I can hold on. Big cage.
Does anyone still need the information for problem number 3? I'm looking for x-intercepts. What do I know my y value has to be? X-intercepts mean y has to be equal to 0. So if I replace y with 0, I have 0 equals 4x squared minus 4x minus 3. How would I solve something like that?
That would be 4 times negative 3.
Yeah, try factoring. And if factoring wouldn't work, where would I go from there? Quadratic formula. Okay, so let's try factoring. So it's good. 4 times negative 3. And it's negative 12. So are there any numbers that multiply to give me a negative 12 that also add up to my middle term, which is negative 4?
6 and 2.
Negative 6 and 5 and 2.
Okay, so a negative 6. A positive 2 would work, right? So let's rewrite our problem. 4x squared equals 2 is 4. Notice we just split our middle term. So I can factor by grouping here. What could I factor out of that first set? 2x. And that leaves you with what?
2x.
plus 1. What could I factor out of that second cell? It leads with a negative, so let's factor out a negative 3. So what does that leave you with? 2x. We factor out a negative, so that does change the sign. So what do my two factors end up being?
2x minus 3 and 2x plus 1.
Thank you. So what do I do with those two factors?
Set it to 0.
So 2x minus 3 equals 0. And 2x plus 1 equals 0. Solving for x. 2x equals 3. So x ends up being what for this part?
3 over 2.
3 over 2. If I subtract the 1, I get 2x equals negative 1. So what does x end up being for this part?
Negative 1.
Now they're asking for x-intercepts. Notice your answers are written as ordered pairs. So if I know y is 0, what would my two ordered pairs be? I know y is 0.
3 over 2 is 0.
There we go. So what's answer choice has those 2 points?
E.
Any questions on that? You could. What's more difficult? But do it quadratic. Any questions on that one? All right, on number 5.
I really have a question.
Well, they don't match. Are they supposed to match? And x plus 3, x minus 3.
process, you weren't even sure where to begin. So remember when you're adding or subtracting, you have to have an LCD. And so we're gonna look at the denominators and see if we can do any factoring to help us find the LCD. So that's where you need to start factoring the denominators. Let's start here. What could we factor out?
7.
The 7. So it'll be 2x over 7 times x plus 3. What about this 7x minus 21? 7 times, help me out here, Joni.
X minus 3.
X minus 3. All right, so we factor the denominators. Then from here, we've got to determine the LCD, least common denominator. So what do you think the LCD would end up being?
7 is supposed to be 7.
So the 7 we need it, and the x plus 3, what else?
X minus 3.
X minus 3. So we need that combination. That's going to be our least common denominator. So we're going to write each fraction with that LCD. Alright, so we've accomplished that the denominators look the same, and that's what we wanted to do. But what would I need to multiply this denominator by for it to have the same meaning as this?
X minus 3.
X minus 3. So if we multiply the denominator by x minus 3, we got to multiply the numerator by x minus 3. And how are we going to be able to simplify that numerator? That's right, we're going to distribute that 2x, which is going to give me what?
2x
Square minus
6.
6.
Minus 6. X. Very good. Alright, once again, how did we get this? By distributing the 2x. Distributing the 2x. Alright, this other fraction, I'm doing the same thing. I'm comparing the denominators, and I notice there's a factor missing. What factor is missing?
X plus 3.
X plus 3. So if I multiply the bottom by x plus 3, I need to multiply the numerator by x plus 3.
Yes.
And then how are we going to be able to simplify that numerator? How are we going to get rid of the parentheses? That's right, we're going to distribute the 6, which is going to be 6x plus 18. So 6x plus 18. Trying to find a marker that's a little bit darker. Oh, wow, yeah. All right, we're looking at the operation between the two fractions. What are they asking me to do? Add, so we're going to add like terms. That's the only 2x squared, only x squared term is that 2x squared. What about this negative 6x plus a positive 6x? They're going to cancel. So 2x squared plus 18 over my LCD. We always say before you indicate that's your final answer, you got to check and see if you can do any factoring with the numerator. Can we do anything in terms of the numerator? Okay, take a 2 out because that's the greatest common factor. What about that x squared plus 9? Can I factor it further?
Yeah.
Why?
Just plus 9.
It's a plus, it's not subtraction. Very good. So am I able to do any canceling? No, not noticing anything. So what should we pick in terms of our answer? He is in fact. Any questions on that one? The backtrack? Need some clarification. I think you just forgot what to do in terms of adding and subtracting. You didn't know where to start. So remember, you got to factor your denominators first. Factor the denominators first. And then go from there to determine the LCD. Questions? All right, we're moving on. Problem 6.
5 still on the board? Number 6, would everyone agree that we just have one fraction being divided by another? Right, what do you do when you divide fractions? Right, so think of that same change flip, keep this one on top the same. You change it to multiplication, and you flip the fraction you're dividing by. What would my next step be? Factor everything. So 2x squared minus x minus 21. I'm assuming you're all excellent at factoring at this stage. What would your factors be for 2x squared minus x minus 21?
X plus 3.
7, 6.
How about negative 7 plus 6?
All right, you're not. All right,
Negative
so
1.
let's go 2 times negative 21.
42.
Is negative 42. So is there anything that multiplies to give me negative 42 that adds up to negative x?
Negative
7 and 6.
Okay. So if we split the middle term, so plus 6x minus 7x minus 21. What can I factor out of this grouping? Leave me with plus 3. What can I factor out of that second grouping? We need x plus 3, because that's going to change that negative 21. So my two factors would be x plus 3 and 2x minus 7. Charmaine, I think that's what you're, is that what you got?
Yes.
Okay. So let's factor number 2.
This is where I flipped in.
I have this one listed as number 2. So I've got 6x squared minus 6. What can I factor out of that?
3, 4, 6.
Yeah, let's go with 6. -6. And I got x squared minus 1. Can I take that any further?
Plus 1 and minus 1.
X plus 1 and x minus 1. All right, for number 3, what's the only thing I can do for number 3? Pick out the 12. X minus 1. Can't do anything else. On the fourth one, I've got 2x squared plus 9x. So I can do the same thing I did here. 2 times 9 is what?
18.
Are there any factors of 18 that add up to 9? 63. So I can split my middle term into 2x squared plus 6x plus 3x plus 9. So if I do factoring by grouping, what can I factor out of that first set? 2x. Leaves me with x plus 3. What can I factor out of that second set?
3.
X plus 3. So my two factors will end up being x plus 3 and 2x plus 3. So after we factor everything, we're going to replace our two fractions with that information. So on top, I've got x minus 3. Thank you. X plus 3 and 2x minus 7. 6. X plus 1. X minus 1. On the right fraction, I've got 12. X minus 1. And I have x plus 3. And 2x plus 3. Once you have it factored, we can reduce. We can cancel out common factors on the top and the bottom. So what can cancel here?
6 and 12.
Okay, so we got x plus 3.
Yes.
What else?
X minus 1.
X minus 1.
6 into the 12.
Yeah, and we can reduce that 6 and that 12, right? So if I cross out the 6 and the 12,
Got a 2 up there.
I'll write a 2. Anything else that will cancel? No. So we have 2x minus 7 and 2 on the top. What should I write first? 2. Well, single term should be first. 5 left on the bottom.
X plus 1, 2x plus 3.
And that would be my answer. So what letter choice is that going to be?
E.
Any questions on that one? That one basically just comes down to knowing how to factor. Very important.
topic 6, may I go ahead and erase it? You'll erase it. Alright, so problem 7, they're asking me to solve, and I noticed that we have parentheses. So somehow I've got to simplify the problem down by getting rid of the parentheses. So we're going to distribute the 3x. Alright, and then from here I'm going to get it in standard form. So how are we going to get it in standard form? Okay, so we're going to subtract the x. And I need to subtract the 5. Alright, so we're going to be left with 3x squared. I need to combine like terms, so I have a negative 9x combined with a negative x. Negative 10x. And I still have the minus 5. And that's going to equal to 0. Now we're hoping it will factor, but will it? 3 times a negative 5 give me a negative 15. So are there any factors of a negative 15 that add to give me a negative 10? No. Alright, but it's quadratic, so what are some other options for solving it? Quadratic formula, so what's A?
3.
And what's B? And what's C? Alright, so x is going to equal to the opposite of b, meaning we're going to change that sign, right? The opposite of b. So it's going to end up being a positive 10, plus or minus, we're going to take that b and square it, minus 4 times a, which is 3, times c, which is a negative 5, all divided by 2 times a, which is 2 times 3. Alright, y'all okay with that?
Yeah.
Good to go?
Yes.
Okay. So x is going to equal to 10 plus or minus square root of, what about that negative 10 squared?
100.
100. Now this is a problem area for a lot of people in terms of what sign do I put here, but think of this as a product. So what's a negative times a positive times a negative? It's going to be positive. It's going to be positive what? 60. All divided by 6. Alright, y'all okay with that? So far so good. Alright, we're going to add underneath the radical. So 10, x is going to equal to 10 plus or minus square root of 160. All divided by 6. Alright, so let's go to the 160 because I got to break it apart. It's not a perfect square. So how are we going to deal with that? Okay, 16 and 10. Alright, 16 times 10. So what's the square root of 16? 4. Alright, we're on the downward end of the problem, but I'm checking to see if I can do any simplifying. So I'm checking to see, could I factor something out that would cancel with part or all of that 6? 2. A 2. I'm going to do some factoring. I have my 2 outside the parentheses. I'm keeping my denominator the same at this stage. And we're going to fill in. So 2 times something brings me back to 10. 5. Plus or minus what needs to be out in front now, because 2 times something brings me back to that. 2 square root of 10. Alright, let me move out of the way. What's going to happen with the 2 and the 6? What's going to happen with that information? Alright. And what's this going to be? 3. So x is going to equal to 5 plus or minus 2 square root of 10 all divided by 3. How many answers does that really represent? 2. So be careful, sometimes they'll list them separately rather than using the plus or minus.
That very last part, could you also list it like x equals 5 plus 2 radical 10, and then an x equals 5 minus 2?
Yes, you could separate them, one with the addition and one with the subtraction. And sometimes you will see that on the multiple choice test, because it really represents 2 answers. Yes, you're exactly correct. All right, so which one should we be picking? A as an apple. Any step I need to go back to, y'all? Pretty much understand? We're good? I think there's a couple of areas where we get confused. One is in reference to that negative b is really just saying the opposite of b. Just change the sign of b for that first part of the formula. The other part's in reference to the sign. Think of that as a product. A negative times a positive times a negative gives me addition. And then at the end, trying to reduce it, I think, is another problem area.
That's what I do.
No problems with that. Any step I need to go back to, y'all? We're good? All right, we're moving on to 8.
That's your slope. Yeah.
He said on around 2 hours. He just wants to come back, and so he doesn't have to come back again.
Oh, yeah, I did on that one, but I need to retake on that.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
The final is what, Monday? So I have this week to retake. Right, okay.
The white and where? The white. And equals. Okay.
2 minus 1. X squared.
Is everyone good with number 7? Problem number 8 wants us to find the equation of the line that passes through this set of points. When they want the equation of the line, what form are they after?
M equals,
When they ask for the equation of the line, our goal is going to be y equals mx plus b. Okay. So we have 2 points here. So the first thing we need to do is we need to find the slope. And Charmaine, I think this is the formula you were going after.
yeah.
We need to find the slope since we're given 2 points. So I'm going to go ahead and label my points x1, y1, x2, y2. So if I plug that information in, I've got 3 minus -6. Don't forget that double negative there. And then x2 minus x1, so -4 minus 6. So what is that 3 minus -6? What does that change into?
3 plus 6.
And 3 plus 6, which is 9.
Uh-huh.
And -4 and -6,
Negative 10.
-10. We really don't want our negative in the bottom, so we'll just simplify that and say, put it on top or off to the side. It's a -9/10. So we need that information for our equation, so let's move to the point slope equation. What's the point slope equation?
Y minus y1 is x minus x1.
I know some instructors go back and use y equals mx plus b, but we use the point slope. So let's plug our information in. Y minus y1. You could use either one of these points, it doesn't matter. But since I've got this one labeled x1, y1, I'm just going to go ahead and use that point. Our slope we found to be -9/10. And then x minus x1 is x minus 6. So what could I do to the left side? Y minus -6 is really what?
Y
plus 6.
1 plus 6. -9/10 times x.
-9/10 x.
Okay. And all of a sudden we got -9/10 times -6. We'll start freaking out. But there's no need to. Well, we don't need it, right? Because we're not adding and subtracting, we're just multiplying. So I'm going to do that work off to the side. -9/10 times -6. -6 over 1. So is my answer going to be positive or negative?
Positive.
And I could just multiply across if I wanted to, right? 9 times 6 is 4. 10 times 1 is 10. All right, so could I clear my fractions if I wanted to? Yes, why can't I? Well, more importantly, I have an equal sign. And if you don't have an equal sign, you can't clear your fraction. So let's clear our fractions. What would my LCD be? What's my only denominator? 10. So let's multiply by 10. So what does that give me on the left side? 10 times y plus 6.
10y plus 6.
10y plus 6 equals. What's going to happen on the right side?
Negative 9x plus
Right, the 10s are going to cancel out, right? That's what's the point for clearing our fractions. We're just going to be left with negative 9x plus 54. Remember, we're multiplying the left side by 10, and we're also multiplying the right side by 10. So now my goal is to get y equals mx plus b. We want to get y by itself. So what do I need to move first?
60.
Okay. Let's subtract the 60. So that's 10y equals negative 9x. 54 minus 60? Minus 6. My last step there would be to do what? Let's divide that by 10. So we're going to divide every piece by 10. So y equals, can I reduce negative 9/10 at all?
No.
Can I reduce a negative 6 over 10?
Yes.
Yes. What does that reduce to? Divide both of those by 2 and get 3/5. And that will be my equation of the line that goes to those 2 points. So what answer choice would that be? C. That is correct. Did I have to clear my fractions here? No, you didn't have to. You could have subtracted 6, done a common denominator. Would you have ended up with the same answer? Yes. So it's up to you at that stage, but remember, you can only clear fractions if you have an equal sign, something to balance both sides. Any questions on that one? All right.
Just listen.
take one out, put one in. But, okay. Gotcha.
All right, so let's look at problem 9. It should be familiar in the sense of kind of the setup with problem 6, except we had a division problem, but remember we have to change it to multiplication when we have division. So looking at problem 9, I've numbered them. We're going to do some factoring off to the side. So let's look at this trinomial. So 4x cubed plus 10x squared minus 6x. What's the greatest common factor? 2x. All right, and then we're looking inside the parentheses to see if we can factor further. We're looking at 2 times a negative 3 being a negative 6. So are there any factors of a negative 6 that are going to add to give me a positive 5?
Hold on, sorry.
6 and 1, so which one's positive, which one's negative? 6 is positive and the 1 is negative. All right, we're going to factor by grouping. I don't want to forget about the 2x at the end, so that's the reason I put the arrow. So looking at this grouping, we can take out 2x, leaving me with x plus 3. What about this grouping?
1.
Negative 1, leaving me with x plus 3. So we have x plus 3 times 2x minus 1, and the 2x has to be out front. All right, are y'all okay with part 1? Part 1. So once again, I can tell a lot of y'all looking at it, so let's go back. Taking out the greatest common factor of 2x. Inside the parentheses, I'm checking to see if I can factor further. Looking at 2 times the negative 3 gave me the negative 6. Factors of a negative 6 that add to give me a positive 5 would be 6 and a negative 1. Splitting the middle term, factoring by grouping, and I don't want to forget about the 2x that was listed out in front. That greatest common factor of 2x. All right, so let's move on to part 2. Part 2. This one's a little bit easier because the leading coefficient is what? 1. Makes it a little bit easier to work with.
4 and positive 3.
Positive.
Positive.
Which one's positive?
The 3.
The 3 is positive. All right, so we're done with that one, right? Part 2. Part 3, let's look at it. No greatest common factor, so 10 times a negative 2 gives me a negative 20. All right, so are there any factors of a negative 20 that are going to add to give me a positive 1?
Positive 4 and negative 4. Positive 5 and negative 4.
All right, very good. So 10x squared plus 5x minus 4x minus 2. We're going to factor by grouping. First grouping, what can we factor out?
5x.
5x, thank you. Leaving me with 2x
Plus 1.
plus 1. What about the next grouping?
Negative 2.
Negative 2, leaving me with what inside the parentheses? 2x plus 1. So we have 2x plus 1 times 5x minus 2. All right, so we're finished with part 3. Let's move on to part 4. Part 4. All right, so do we have a greatest common factor?
4.
We do. All right, right, can I do any more factoring with it? What about that 4x squared minus 1?
2x.
All right, difference of squares. All right, so I think we now have it all factored. So let's bring in our factors. All right, so let's go back to that part 1. So here's my part 1, looking for the factors. 2x times x plus 3 times 2x minus 1. Part 2, looking for my factors, x plus 3, x minus 4. Part 3, 2x plus 1, and 5x minus 2. And then part 4, we have a Gray's common factor of 4, don't want to forget about that. And 2x minus 1 times 2x plus 1. All right, so we have all of our factors. We're now checking to see what we can cancel. Do you notice anything? 2x plus 1. Everybody in agreement there? Cancel that. What else?
2x minus
2x minus 1.
2x plus 3.
Oh, and the x plus 3. Anything else? Okay, now what about this 2 and this 4?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't want to forget about that x.
4 is going
And the 2 is going to be down there, you're correct. All right, so let's look at what we have left. In the numerator, we still have this x left, y'all in agreement? What else do we have left in the numerator? 5x minus 2. In the denominator, 2 times what? X minus 4. All right, which one should we be picking on our sheet?
B.
B? Any questions on that number 9?